The international team Mousesports is definitely a big and interesting talking point given some of their recent ups and downs, as well as the news going around about a potential roster move being on the horizon. But I want to make this video more about just the roster move, more than just talking about Snax being benched and Styko making his return, which is something that's been reported on by Nell as it was being, discussed that this move would happen, and then DK just came out with a report where apparently it's a done deal and it should be announced soon. And by the time I release this video, maybe it has been announced, but who knows, maybe Mousesports has go in a completely different direction and get a whole another fifth, or maybe they make more than one move. Who really knows? But again, that's why I want to make this video more about the journey Mousesports has been on, more than just the move that is coming down the line. And why are we talking about this is maybe a good question to ask. And really, it's because there's been some very recent struggles from Mousesports. I mean, just recently at the Starlighter Season 6 finals, they go out in the group stage where they were the only top 5 team in the world at the event. There was no Astralis, there was no Navi, there was no Team Liquid, there was no FaZe, there was no Made in Brazil. All these other teams that are kind of towards the top 5 of the world. Mousesports is one of the big favorites coming into this. The only other teams that were really top 10 territory were, NRG and Big. So Mousesports were certainly a favorite to win this event, especially considering they just won ESL1 New York against Team Liquid in the grand finals, as well as beating Energy in the semifinals. So you really felt like Mousesports had a chance to follow up big here in Starlighter, and they didn't. They wound up losing to Ints, an up-and-coming team from Finland that has been doing some pretty cool stuff in the Tier 2 scene. I will say that. They even had a pretty cool event at Cologne at a big Tier 1 event, but still you would think Mousesports might have more overall talent, more experience together as a team, should be able to pull it off, and they can't. Also lose to Optic, a team that's been having plenty of struggles lately. And then, losing to Big, a team where, again, you would think Mousesports should have more overall firepower, more skill to leverage and be able to get the job done. But in fact, the only two teams that Mousesports beat at this event are CyberZen and Sprout, which are definitely not big claims to have. And then they also had last place at the Major. Now, granted, they did have one of the toughest schedules at the Major. Their losses were to NIP, Made in Brazil, FaZe, all top 10 teams in the world. But still, you would think Mousesports would be able to do better than this with their talent, with some of the other results they were getting, because they did have some high marks. Again, they did win ESL1 New York, though I will add the caveat that I feel like Team Liquid choked that more than Mousesports won it, but still Mousesports played well. They had different players go off at different times. They seized the opportunity Liquid gave them, and they did win the trophy, and so you still have to give them credit no matter how much Liquid may have made mistakes, along the way to cause Mousesports' victory to come a little bit easier for them. And then they had a top 4 finish at Stockholm, top 4 finish at E-League Premier. They beat FaZe at both of those tournaments. And yes, FaZe are having their issues, but still a lot of talent on that team. And so still pretty cool to see Mousesports be able to best them and be able to, get some top 4 finishes. Now, they did also have a really tough time at Cologne, though, too. We do have to add that into the list of ups and downs that Mousesports has been dealing with since Snax's addition to the team. And, at that Cologne event, again, they lost to G2. They lost to Ints. This was definitely not a good event. The only win they get's against Gambit, and they take a map off of G2 in a best of 3. But definitely a poor performance, right up there with Starlighter Season 6, right up there with the disappointment at the Major. And not only are these disappointments coming up, and that's why, there's a lot of talk about Mousesports, but there's also, again, the rumors we've already mentioned about, Styko making a return. And we start to learn more and more about why the removal of Styko seems even more odd than already initially expected. I mean, I think a lot of people were taken back by Styko's removal just because he seemed like he was a good supportive element to the team. Seemed like the team was getting decent enough results. And now we're getting a comment, from Sunny after they won New York, where they talked about how Styko's communication was huge for the team. A quote that is from this interview says, like, if I'd push up mid and couldn't talk, he, regarding Styko, was communicating and managing the players, letting them know what's going to happen next. So it seems like not only was Styko facilitating communication, he was also almost a secondary caller, helping direct traffic, helping make sure everyone was on the same page, helping make sure that maybe their timings were on point, that people were following up utility properly, that people were going when they needed to, that the spacing wasn't off. It seemed like he was kind of helping micromanage things alongside Chris J to make sure that what simple framework they did have was operating as optimally as it could. So, you always talk about issues with communication, international teams, with people maybe having English as their second language, and even if it was their primary language they were communicating in, some people are still better communicators than others. And so it just compounds the problem when you're adding the second language of English into it all. And so, yeah, it seems like Styko was missed in more ways than one, not just for his supportive play style that facilitated other players, but also the communication he helped provide to make sure the team was operating as well as it could. And so, it's definitely tough because, what they had with Styko back towards the end of 2017 and going through 2018 was a good thing. I mean, they had won that ESG Tour Mykonos event over Team Liquid. They had a couple of good showings at like a DreamHack Denver, DreamHack winner, only losing to teams like Navi and then like Cloud9, which at the end of 2017, Cloud9 was really strong. They were amping up towards their big run at E-League Boston. They were having some pretty cool results. This was a pretty strong Cloud9 team at that point in time. Then, of course, we all remember the legendary finals against FaZe at the ECS Season 4 finals, where they had some crazy close maps against FaZe. It was probably one of the best finals in CSGO history. And they had, earlier in the tournament, beaten Astralis, which was a huge move for them. And they did a couple other cool things at that event. So they had some good stuff going on for them. The only real dark mark was them bombing at the E-League premiere of 2017 right after Mykonos. But they were really ending 2017 strong, and then coming into 2018, they get Legends at the, E-League Boston event, which is, a long time since Mousesports had done jack shit at a major. And so this E-League Boston finish was definitely huge for them. And they only get beat out by FaZe, the eventual finalist of the event, and a team that should have and definitely was very close to winning the whole event. And of course, them being one of the best teams in the world. So only losing to that team, that's a pretty good track record, especially because they've beaten Astralis and Navi in best of ones in the various group stages leading up to the playoffs. So they did have that one rough loss to QBF, though, I will say that. But all in all, it's still a pretty good event for them. They obviously then afterwards won that Starlighter Season 4 finals. That was huge. They beat Navi to do it on home soil. They had beaten Team Liquid, Cloud9, SK, other teams earlier in the event. So this was a huge mark for them. It seemed like they were starting to kind of peak a little bit here. They did take a step back, though, at Marseille. Only a top 8 finish there. Navi getting their revenge. IM Sydney, they lose in the semifinals to Astralis. Then at the EPL Season 7 finals, they get knocked out by Team Liquid in 5th, 6th place. And at the Starlighter Season 5 finals, they lose to Navi in the semis after having beat NIP. And they had beaten Navi actually earlier in the tournament. They had beaten Tyler. They had beaten North. And there were some other teams they had beaten through all this. Like they had, consistently actually beat SK a few times in some of these different events. And they were beating some of the top North American teams. And so they were doing some pretty cool stuff. And how they were doing it is that they actually had pretty well-established roles. Styko was a supportive player on the edge of the map. He was, facilitating utility. He was apparently helping communicate and help call things from the interview we got from Sonny. And he definitely was that element of the team. Yes, he wasn't putting up the biggest numbers, but he seemed to be helping other people out quite a lot. You had Rops, the young guy coming in, the FPL star, a very good passive rifler on the edge of the map, but it sometimes could flex and be a little bit more aggressive and make a play or help trade into a site. But again, a little bit more on the positive end of the spectrum, but he was really amping up, really building up his form on this team. You had Chris J, who was transitioning from being a primary opper to now being a pretty damn good entry rifler, as well as kind of learning how to be a tactician along the way, slowly adding more stuff to Mousesports. Yes, they did have a very simplistic style of Counter-Strike, just very aggressive, but what you at least could say about them was that they were super explosive, which made them very dangerous, all their firepower, and even if they were playing simpler Counter-Strike, at least they were a cohesive unit. Like, they followed up picks very well. They were very quick to react to an opening kill and make sure that everyone's on the same page to follow it up right away before CTs can make proper rotations or adjust for the attack that they just made. They could throw in some pretty explosive executes with basic utility and just make sure that the spacing was good, the timing was good, everyone was ready to run in and gun down. They had the skill to be able to make those types of executes work. Yes, they maybe had a tougher time digging deeper into the playbook when they needed to make adjustments. Again, yes, it was a simpler version of Counter-Strike, but at the very least, again, it was cohesive. And that's really important because later on down the line, things really started to break down in that regard. Uh, the other thing is that their map pool was certainly better than it is now. They were one of the best teams in the world on Mirage. They had cash. They would get Dust 2 as it came in. They were quite good on Train. They were definitely doing some great stuff throughout 2018 with their map pool. But with the addition of Snax, a lot of this really came to a screeching halt. Now, before I get into that, I will say I can at least understand why the temptation was there for Mousesports to make a move, despite a lot of the success that, the Styko version of the team had. They were constantly running up against the wall when it came to playing other top teams in the world. Yeah, they did beat Navi that one time at the Starladder Season 4 finals. Yes, at times they could beat Team Liquid like they did at the Starladder Season 4 finals, so that event was really key for them. But, a lot of the time they were losing to Astralis, they were losing to Navi, they were losing to FaZe, they were losing to Team Liquid. These teams were starting to slowly become more impressive. And, Astralis goes on to be the best team in the world. FaZe is still hanging up there until, they go through some stand-in period. And even during that time, though, they were still at times winning tournaments and consistently placing top 4. Whereas now Mousesports is going from like consistent top 14 to sometimes dropping down to top 8 or 5th, 6th place. And so you can understand the temptation was there because it did feel like maybe they had hit a ceiling, right? Maybe they, no matter what, they were just never going to have enough talent to match up to a FaZe. They're always going to be the mini version of that team. They were never going to be tactically strong enough to handle some of the more tactical teams like a Liquid as they were growing strategically, or like an Astralis as they were rising up to become the best team in the world. And so I can understand that, they maybe had a choice to make. Either they try to bring in an in-game leader to add some tactical depth, to add some leadership to the team. That is one route they could have gone. Maybe you remove Styko and bring in an in-game leader. But then the other thing is, well, we'll keep the same style, but we'll add firepower. Because, look, a lot of these teams have a shit ton of talent on their team. Astralis, obviously, all 5 players were contributing super well. FaZe, outside of Kerrigan, had an enormous amount of firepower. Team Liquid's firepower was huge. They were increasingly getting stronger as they made roster moves, bringing people in, like NAF being, of course, the most recent piece, where now they have, a sick amount of firepower on that team. Even a Navi, like just how good Electronic and Simple are above many others in the world. And the fact that Flamey is a reliable third, Made in Brazil's making moves to add more firepower like Tarek and Stewie 2K. So you can understand that mentality is there. Like, okay, maybe we can go the firepower route instead and kind of keep Chris J developing as an in-game leader and see where that takes us. The problem is that you don't really get more firepower. You picked up Snax, who was well past his prime. I can understand why you wanted to maybe pick him up in like 2016, maybe even early 2017, but it seems like they were really optimistic about how they could get Snax back up to a high level, getting him away from the Virtus Pro environment. Seemed like they were banking on that way too heavily without really any reassurance that could even actually happen. And it left you scratching your head, like, if you wanted more firepower, why didn't you go get really proven firepower? Why not grab someone else out in the international scene that for sure would come in and be able to produce? So it seemed like it was always going to be a dice roll with Snax, even if you can understand why they wanted to make a move away from Styko to get a little bit more firepower. Because the bottom line is that Snax was not enough of a firepower addition to make up for all the shortcomings that the team was going to go through with his addition to the team. Yes, in general, Snax frags better than Styko when you look at overall numbers. But Snax definitely has his off games where he doesn't really add any value, and it just doesn't make up for what you lost in communication, what you lost in a supportive element that, Styko brought to the team. It just didn't really help. Certainly also didn't help that someone like Rops had a dip in form. Not terrible, still positive overall across the events he played in, but certainly he had way more off maps or off series now compared to, earlier in 2018 and in late 2017. Also, their map pool is slipping big time with Snax on the team. We were talking about how they were one of the best Mirage teams in the world before. They were 17-3 in their first 20 games of 2018. Well, they're 12-15 since. They've only won 4 of their last 10 games. So their Mirage is really fallen off of a cliff. Their Inferno, they've only won 3 of the last 10 games they played on that map, so that's really slipped. It seems like the only maps they really have right now are Cash, Dust 2, and Train. Because Nuke's very hit or miss, and we talked about their struggles on Inferno and Mirage, and they don't really play Overpass. So, their map pool has really dried out in a big way. And I think Mirage is obviously the biggest loss there. And what I have to say ties into all this is that the team overall has just not looked as sharp or as on the same page tactically since this whole move happened. You know, you've had Chris J swapping spots in certain matches, like now he plays B apartments on Mirage instead of part of the mid-attacking group like he had been used to doing, because he was an entry fragger next to Sunny, who, you know, Sunny is one of the only guys that seems to have really retained form. You know, I think he's one of the best entry riflers in the world right now, right behind Dupree, if you're talking about pure entry rifling. I mean, sure, there's some other big playmakers out there, like a Simple, Electronic, a Twist. Some of these guys can also have really strong opening power, but when you think about pure entry riflers, soldiers who always go in first, I think Sunny is right there on the heels of Dupree. But again, the big problem is like you're moving Chris J around on his T spots. He's not maybe entering as much as he used to. He still can sometimes, can go for plays. Sometimes he does just solo entry from B apartments on Mirage and get you an opening that you can snowball on. But he's definitely had to take a back seat overall when it comes to how he facilitates attacks on T sides. Some CT spots have had to change, like Rops gave up a spot on Cash to Snax, for example. So the adjustments made to account for Snax has caused for some people to be less impactful than they used to be and less comfortable than perhaps they used to be. So when you add all of it up, you've really not gained much firepower from Snax. He really hasn't contributed much to the team. Someone like Rops has slipped a little bit in form. Chris J has had to make even more sacrifices than he had to originally by giving up the primary opping role. And your map pool is slipping, and the results are not anywhere where they used to be outside of the New York win. At this point, you know, you've regressed instead of making progress. And so now the thought is to bring Styko back to the team, which will at least get them back to where they perhaps were at the end of 2017 or throughout the early part of this year, which is, you know, we can take care of business against some of the tier 2 opposition, some of the underdogs. We can usually topple them over, but you're still running up against the wall against like an Astralis, a Navi, a Team Liquid. Obviously, FaZe is starting to slip a little bit, so maybe Mousesports wouldn't have as much trouble with FaZe as they used to. In fact, again, they were even beating with the Snax lineup at E-League Premier in Stockholm. But, you know, at least you can kind of get back to the foundation you had, and maybe you can build from that. But you do have to have some concerns, like, is there going to be awkwardness at first? I seriously doubt they're just going to go right back to how things were with Styko helping facilitate communication and management of players during strategies. And, you know, you have to wonder if there's going to be a little bit of personal resentment. You have to worry about all those things. You also have to worry about, apparently their practice routine lately hasn't been that good. That came out in an interview with Chris J, where practice was a big problem, that they weren't putting in the hours. Is this going to motivate them to start putting in the hours? Because no matter who your fifth player is, if the preparation isn't there while you're having a rough patch, when you need practice the most, then of course you're not really going to get to where you need to be a true contender. And so that's another big thing that comes into it. And even with Styko's return, let's say you get a supportive element back. Let's say Rops gets back into form now because of this, because the communication's better. And maybe Chris J gets back into being more of an entry rifler with Sunny, because Styko can take up all the supportive stuff. And maybe this really helps everyone mold back together again. You still have to wonder, is their ceiling too low? Will changes still have to be made? You know, I've always heard all these rumors about Oscar being on the chopping block due to personality conflicts and attitude issues and whatever the case may be on a personal front, even though his numbers are really good. You know, what is going to have to happen here? Because again, I think that hopefully this will at least get them back to playing a more cohesive, more sharp and better timing, less errors version of aggressive, explosive Counter-Strike. But is it ever going to be as good as it used to be? Is there going to be something lacking there? Even if they get it back to where it used to be, how far can it really take them? It seems like they're still going to need something to make them deeper tactically, whether it be an in-game leader change at some point in the future, or whether somehow Chris J can develop even more as a shot caller. You do have to wonder if the talent issue is still going to be a problem. Because, yeah, Styko doesn't bring a whole hell of a lot of firepower. And they often thought that he didn't take enough initiative. That's another thing I read in an interview that they liked for Snax for, is he would at least take initiative, where Styko wouldn't take it as much. Can they find a happier balance there with Styko helping contribute with firepower as well as still doing his old supportive stuff that they really seem to need to be able to function properly? You know, but even if they get that back, you know, are they still going to be able to match up with like an Astralis and Navi if FaZe gets their act together? What Made in Brazil seems to be making progress. Team Liquid's definitely still out there and is a heavy hitter. Yeah, you got them at New York, but they were making a lot of mental errors there that maybe they're not going to make again in the future. So we just kind of have to wonder, is Mousesports forever destined just to be kind of a lower-end top 5 team and never really be, you know, the bride, but always the bridesmaid, never be able to consistently get titles, never really be a top 3 team in the world on a regular basis? You have to wonder if that's really the case. Or can somehow this magically fix everything with Styko coming back? I think not. I think that they're still going to be running into some huge problems to get some of the elite teams in the world, but I would be happy to be proven wrong. But it does just seem like they're still going to need a lot of work, whether it be another roster move at some point in the future, whether it be somehow maybe finding roles for players again, maybe swapping some roles around, whether it be adding some new plays to their playbook, doing some better scouting to help counter-strat people a little bit better. Whatever their approach is going to be, that's up to them, but this isn't going to be some magical Band-Aid that gets Mousesports back to being one of the best teams in the world. I think they're still a very dangerous team. They still can certainly make a deep run at a tournament. But if they really truly want to be elite, if they ever want to be in the running for, greatest team of all time or one of the, top 5, top 10 teams of all time, then there's a lot of work to be done, whether it's more changes or whether it's somehow internally figuring things out. I'm not sure. But Mousesports has definitely been through the ringer lately with the Snax move and the struggles they've had recently, and they definitely do have a long road ahead of them to truly be an elite team again. So just wanted to throw this together. Hope you folks enjoyed. If you did, please follow, subscribe for more content. Thanks so much.